Welcome to the Odd Combo Show, where we hold few rigid beliefs, yet many a growing suspicions. Thank you, Robert Anton Wilson, for those curious words of wisdom. Oh, yeah, and an unyielding, unwavering faith which continues to grow deeper day by day. Praise the Lord! Uh, this is for those who find themselves digging deeper, curiouser and curiouser, seeking truth for the sake of truth, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, despite how it may disrupt your current worldviews and or paradigms, or especially your emotional state. We're digging deep here. And hi, my name is Chris. I'm an addict, and although that does not define me, that is a central theme and focal point of why I am here talking to you, and feel anything I'm saying might be worth some people listening. I pray this finds who it needs when they may need to hear it, and something hopefully worthy of your time within this video. We're going to try to condense a lot into this. I've had a very interesting life, interesting journey. Very grateful for every step, but I haven't always had that outlook. Started with being born dead and being taken away apparently for a couple days and being brought back to my parents who hadn't even gotten to hold me, I guess, and then being told that I had died and would likely grow up to be retarded, which this is what my parents told me growing up. So if you're offended, F you, buddy, because this is my life. They told I'd likely grow up to be retarded, severe brain damaged, and I always say I walked away mostly unscathed. But I think we take for granted especially how early on in our lives, especially because we don't remember the earliest of years really, how profoundly that shapes and affects who we are and how we become, product of your environment. And my parents never sought out answers for what happened. They were both addicts. I don't know if that had anything to do with whatever happened to me. I don't know what happened to me, and that's part of what we're trying to figure out here and we've been trying to figure out. But for a while, it felt like a burden to me and really haunted me. In these last few years, I've been able to make it kind of fun, one could say. Turned into unraveling a life mystery and discovering and delving into one's own personal mythology, because my family's not around. Also, yeah, this is another thing. None of what I say is fishing for sympathy or pity or whatever. And I always feel the need to preface these types of talks with that. And I'm tired of doing that. And I'm sure a lot of people are tired of feeling like they can't even talk about these things, because the culture has become such a victim mentality over the most sensitive little things that happens with a lot of words and just ideas, but gets so overused that it becomes watered down and I don't want to say meaningless, but less apt to be taken seriously. And there's a lot of us out here that are, I imagine, waking up more and more some things that happened early on in our life, and maybe we're very confused. I have been for a very long time. I'm a lot less confused in some ways, more in other ways. But so a near-death experience right at birth, if you know anything about the science, decades-long research into near-death experiences and people's first-hand accounts of near-death experiences, I'm not saying I remember anything from that, but it certainly seems to have left me open to a higher sensory input, the way I interface with reality, you could say. And I'm only recently more becoming aware of these things. And because so much of this stuff went unchecked, my parents, again, they weren't the worst of people. They did the best they could. But how many of us have been raised by people who, were doing the best they could and were raised by people who didn't know any better and were doing the best they could. All raised within this American education system that is now generations into this kind of social experiment, you could say, on a countrywide scale. And so my generation, I'm 34, we're the result of a few generations into this now. And we're just at such an interesting time in the world as well, astrologically, cosmically, in every which way possible. And I think it's such a special time to be alive, but it's very chaotic and very can be very scary at times. But that's also one of the things I'm here to do, is spread some hope. Because, addiction plagued me most of my life. I started using drugs very early, but I got addicted to opiates at 15 or 16 with morphine. And I've had many overdoses. I've died. Had some really crazy experiences that, again, have left me open to more subtle, energetic aspects of the world. But I've been diagnosed with ADHD and bipolar, but I have very strong opinions because of my experience in the Western medicine. I have always been drawn intuitively towards more Eastern traditions, holistic traditions, shamanic methods, a lot of time without even realizing it. There's so much I've come to learn in the last decade, but 5 years especially, that it's like, it's almost like I'm remembering things rather than learning things. And especially because I was born with brain damage, and I've also had massive head trauma multiple times, but really bad head injury about 9 years ago that forever changed me, for sure. That's a big part of this too. But shit, sometimes my brain will crap its pants due to this also. But yeah, all the brain injuries and brain trauma, giving hope. Oh my god, this video's all over the place. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to show and be an example that there is hope. If you've had a life filled with various forms of trauma, physical, sexual, emotional, whatever it may be, all of this, okay, so that's where I was going. The heightened sensory aspect of which I interface with the world, in the last couple years, I've realized is why I largely turned to drugs, and especially downers, and alcohol, because my life always felt so loud and chaotic, and I was having really strange paranormal experiences as a very young kid, and nobody ever believed me. Everyone's always just written me off as crazy, and you might do the same as well. But I have quite a back catalog of videos of progression over the last few years. You can judge for yourself. And God, this is the most ungrounded, all over the place talk ever. I don't know where I was trying to go with this, man. I come to you to bring a message of hope, okay? Through a life starting out the way that it did, being sexually abused, physically abused as a kid, being neglected as a kid. And I say this in hindsight because one of the last conversations I had with my mother before she died from a fentanyl overdose was, I told her I got diagnosed with ADHD back when I was like probably 29 or 30. And she apologized to me and it was over the phone, but I could hear the guilt in her voice. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I'm really sorry. She's like, me and your dad really neglected you, especially in comparison to your sister. She's like, we always knew you had some issues, but she's like, I'm really happy to hear you're trying to take care of yourself. And it didn't really occur to me until I heard her say that. You know, it's like you don't really realize that it was bad until in the hindsight, or I don't know. It's weird. It's because it was my life and it's the only experience I know. It seems normal. So also rest in peace, Mom. Yeah, she died from a fentanyl overdose, and that's been a huge inspiration in trying to really do the work and get clean this time around. And it's a progression. It takes time, but I've realized these last few years what I've lacked before in past attempts of trying to get clean is doing the inner work, like really digging deep and going inside yourself to dredge up the root causes of your addiction, like your self-sabotage, your self-destructive tendencies, like you know, that kind of ties back into the idea of, I mentioned generational addiction. My dad always used to talk about the Fiato family curse. That's my last name. I'm Chris Fiato. Fiato family curse. And that's one of those things that kind of always stuck with me, which this just reminded me of something I was going to say earlier. But because I was born with brain damage and have learning disabilities, I always told myself I was dumb, never really read books up until the last few years, with the exception of what they made us read in school, and a few I chose to read when I was younger, because my memory just not very great. But I didn't consciously do it, but the way I tend to learn is I'll hear something and it'll strike an emotion in me, and it wakes something up, and it's more of a feeling of remembering. This has been happening my whole life, and whether I understand it or not in that moment, if it strikes me like that, usually a part of me will hold on to it until later, and it'll come back up at some point. This has happened a lot. It happened especially a lot when I discovered Hermetic philosophy, which is a big part of my outlook and philosophy, and the way I talk about things. So if you don't know much about that, I'll get into that in some bits, but there's plenty of people who've spoken about that could do it far more in depth, and just do more justice. But learning it has profoundly shaped the way I look at myself in the universe, and it's helped me develop a relationship with a higher power, God, creator, which is essential in the recovery process. Something I long struggled with. I had a huge disconnect with God most of my life because of my first memory. I talked about this in a prior video. My grandmother trying to describe heaven to me at 4 gave me this existential crisis. I don't know if there's more to what actually happened, or I just remember bawling my eyes out in her shower afterwards. But yeah, also, so Fiato family curse, that's one thing that kind of stuck with me. My dad always telling me, because of being saved at birth, he would always say, he's like, you're here for some reason, you have an old soul. And as a kid, you don't understand what that means, especially, but that's one of those things that one of those seeds that planted and came back up later in my life. And unfortunately, my dad, him and I are not on good terms, I'll just say. He left when I was 15, because both my parents got really bad into coke, and he got addicted to gambling and shit, and he ran away to Florida, never came back. Remember one day, his coke dealer, who I assume he owed money to, came looking for him, and I was the only one living at this house that nobody was paying the mortgage on. I was 16, came looking for my dad, and I invited him and didn't know the extent of what was going on. Smoked weed with the dude, and it was a strange experience because I could tell he knew he got beat on some money, but was hanging out with this kid who was just ditched by both his parents at 16. Seemed cool at the time. I made the most of it. Partied hard until the bank foreclosed on that house. I had all my stuff in there still. I was in high school. Anyways, God, I'm all over the place, but maybe this is what I'm meant to say. I'm just free flowing, trying to be authentic, keep it raw authentic. There's not enough authentic voices out there, I feel like. If you don't have credentials or you don't have big numbers on YouTube or social medias, like, nobody takes you seriously. And especially being like a poor person, knowing nothing but poverty most of my life. Like, I keep myself afloat these days. I'm very grateful for all that I have in my home, but I've never known what it's like to, have money or anything like that. And, on that in itself, people tend to write you off. The addiction, people, stigmatized like a mofo. But we're trying to put an end to all that. And I want to be able to be a voice of strength and hope, especially for my brothers out there who are feel too embarrassed or vulnerable to open up and talk about being abused. My dad always made fun of me because I've always been tapped into my emotional side, my feminine side. Everything has a masculine and feminine side. Learn to balance them. That's the key of this, is balance, which is bringing me to the core of this message, essentially. Because I don't have a connection to family, and I've had to figure out a lot of things on my own, especially about what happened to me, and what happened earlier in my life, because I started having a lot of these memories bleed back through over the last decade and remembering things. But I've really had to sit with these things for many years because they've taken time to unfold and drip feed, because it's a lot, one, to process, and two, I've wanted to sit with these things and, not just start spouting off like, oh, this happened, being certain of, it's hard to be able to be certain about a lot of things, especially when it comes to being abused as a child, because the people involved, very unlikely that they're going to fess up to it. But I don't think it necessarily matters exactly what happened. But digging to the root, I didn't know about that most of my life. And I found out, that's one of the root traumas that created a dissociation in me at a very early age, that was causing me to self-sabotage and feeling like I didn't deserve good things, and wanted to die, went through a whole considering ending myself, sat and thought with that for a very long time, and I've talked about this in other videos, but I have too much of a reverence, even in my lowest of rock bottoms, like in the basement of rock bottoms, like I could never do that to myself. So I used opiates, fentanyl, xylazine. God, we'll talk about that more later. I'm gonna try and wrap this up soonish, but oh, there's the police trying to catch somebody. Figured, because I felt like I deserved to punish myself, self-sabotage, self-destructive tendencies, just crazy. But I'm grateful to have gone through every step and come out the other side. Not that I'm healed. The journey, the recovery is a lifelong journey and a lifelong battle. But I'm okay with that now. And learning about the magic in life and actual magic, like creating change in one's reality consciously in accordance with your will, is how it's described. All is mind. The universe is mental. Everything stems from a thought. We are responsible for all of our actions. I believe, karma is a legit thing. And if I'm to believe we're responsible for all of our actions, well, I've had to take stuff like reincarnation into consideration, because how could dying immediately or being subjected to abuse as a child be deserved, earned in this lifetime? Not possible. So it must have been another lifetime. Some karma needed to be balanced off. But I also think, I know everything needed to happen exactly as it's happened for me to be here talking to you now. Probably like a rambling crazy person, if anyone's even listening to this at this point. But who knows if I'll even post this. Shit, I'm getting distracted because I'm seeing cop lights over there. And it's getting dark. But it's cold outside. I'm standing here barefoot still this whole time, and have been prior to heretofore until therefore now. But hey, this is a time of hope. They're trying, this world makes you want to be in a state of fear, constant fight or flight, trauma. Become aware of that so you can become aware of how to see their triggers. Learn how to protect yourself. We're going to learn this together. I'm going to share what I've learned with you, pass it on, because I've learned so much through people on YouTube that now it's my turn to pass on stuff that I've learned. Sorry this was so crazy. Bye.